Afternoon and welcome to everyone who has joined us so far to this Zoom image assessment, the first of its kind. And I think depending on how it goes, we should consider having more such Zoom image assessment meetings, but it'll be up to you. So if after this meeting, you could give some feedback to me possibly, about whether you've thought that it works and it's worth doing again or not. So you'll be the judges. So we'll welcome your feedback after the afternoon's debacle. I mean, after this afternoon's assessment. So before we start with it, if I can just mention that as a committee, we've decided to have a fun competition. And Alan has organised now with Lancaster Camera Club that they would like to join us in a fun competition, at just a two club competition. And because it's going to be done via Zoom, they don't have to be local. We don't have to worry about judges travelling to Keswick and doing the judging. So Alan has organised a judge from Northern Ireland, and we've got Lancaster. So he'll probably find himself the individual who collates everyone's images and then sends them off to Northern Ireland and goes away. The procedures will be that everyone will now be muted except for Keith and Richard. This is the first time that Richard will have been able to shut me up, I suppose, really, as well.
That was heartfelt, Marilyn.
After each assessment that Keith gives, if you wish to ask a question, you can either use, just put your hand up, or there is a means to do it by showing a waving hand or something on the screen. And Richard will allow you to be unmuted for the purposes of the question, one at a time, so we don't get a lot of over talking. Not that I would ever do such a thing. But without further ado then, so let's welcome our guinea pig assessor, Keith, who many of you will recognise from the times when you could actually meet people. We're going to lose Keith in a moment or two, because Keith will be sharing his screen and showing the image. So
well, tucked away in the corner, I think.
Okay. Oh, you'll be tucked away in the corner. Okay, mate. So we'll leave it to the techie and the assessor now to take over, and I look forward to it. Thanks very much, Keith, for agreeing to do this, mate, agreeing to be the guinea pig for us. Thanks very much.
Okay, so here we are with the first image, and the first image is called Waiting and Hoping. I'm assuming that this is a composite image. I might be wrong, and you will no doubt correct me if the author's in attendance. But I assumed it was a composite image, and it's, in my view, been very well done indeed. I presume that it's the little girl who's illuminated there in the middle, who's been added to the scene of this desolate cottage. But it's been done exceptionally well if it is a composite image, because you can see that the lighting on the girl is completely coherent with the rest of the scene, even to the extent that if you just look down the side of her, you've got the shadow of the door down one side of the figure. So I mean, the lighting's been done absolutely spectacularly. The strong point of the image is it's a storytelling image. So there's a great narrative feel to it. It's about why is this poor little girl being abandoned in this deserted house is part of the story, obviously. Exposure is absolutely perfect all through the image. So you even get to see the detail in the room beyond, which I appreciate, that's you've got that added narrative to the whole thing. Compositionally, you've got these leading lines formed by the panels of the door. So there's this one here that takes you into the room, these two here which take you to the figure. So she's been very well positioned, the figure, so that these all line up to as I say, add to the composition and make it work. So I'm just looking over at my notes now and see what else I had to say. Part of the narrative, I think, is this coat which hangs at the side. If that coat wasn't there, then you would have this rather empty wooden panels, and it would, yeah, not contribute anything to the image at all. In fact, you'd be encouraged to crop in if that was the case from the right. But since the coat is there, and it's part, I think, of the narrative story, it's an adult coat. Why is it? Is this little girl waiting for someone? If so, where's the person? What's the coat doing there? It's all part of a story that you can inject your own solutions and your own narrative into. I thought the only very minor criticism I had was that I thought this coat was a little bit bright, so that you're supposed to be looking at the little girl really, but then obviously you explore the rest of the scene. But I thought this brightness on this coat just pulled your eye away a little bit. So if anything, I would just tone that coat down just a tiny bit, just to make sure that you just concentrated on the little girl. But other than that very minor criticism, I thought this was an exceptionally well put together composite scene. So those are my comments, and throw it open now for anyone else to make their comments.
Great, is that Graham?
I think you just have to wave your hands in front of your face and Richard will unmute you. I mean, if there aren't any comments, I will move on, but be guided by you, Richard.
Yeah. Did you want to make a comment there, Graham?
No.
You were just waving at the screen.
I was just absent-mindedly waving my arm around.
Right.
Yeah, careful in auctions when you do that.
Yeah. Can you hear us all right? David Stevenson joined us. Can you hear us all right, David?
Yes.
Okay, right. Yeah.
How much have I missed?
Just one. We can't see you at the moment.
You've joined at just the right moment, David.
Oh, thank you. I couldn't find the link. That's the problem was.
Okay. Are you going to do the next one then, Keith?
Okay, so moving on. Where are we? So this image is called Herdwick Sheep and Ducks, Wat and Lath. As you can see, Lake District scene, very typical, except what's not so typical is this long line of sheep here. And I can't believe that the author had an arrangement or a deal with the farmer. So I'm guessing that this must have been taken on the spur of the moment, in which case it's extremely well seen. I mean, what a fantastic line of sheep it is, stretching all the way from the left-hand side right into the distance and round the corner. So absolutely fantastic. I do appreciate that the authors included ducks in the title, because that's to, because if that hadn't been done, then there might have been criticism from lesser judges who might be tempted to label the ducks a distraction. So by adding it into the title, you make sure that the judge knows that you intended them to be there and they are part of the composition, which indeed they are. In fact, if you didn't have the ducks there, if they were not there and that was just empty space, there would be this 50% of the whole scene, which would be taken up by the river. And that would be rather dominant, and the sheep would be almost tucked away in the top. So having the ducks there actually links two parts of the image together. So I think it works very well. I don't see the ducks as a distraction at all. They're in the title and they do add to the narrative of the whole scene. But while we're talking about the river, it's been positioned compositionally in the image, so that running from the bottom left-hand corner, it's almost a leading line taking you to the group of sheep at the top there. And then your eye runs along the sheep and follows them along and diverts over to the ducks as well. So I think the composition's been put together exceptionally well. in an image like this, where you've got detail all the way through the image and detail that needs to be seen, then there's a good, very good choice of depth of field here, so that you get everything pin sharp from the front all the way through to the bottom. Sorry, from the front all the way through to the background. So that's been very well chosen, and the exposure is perfect all through the image too. So you really can take in all the detail of this, what might be a busy scene, but I think these compositional things which have been put into it help to guide you through the narrative of the whole scene and for you to be able to take it all in. So, I mean, it's been exceptionally well seen to spot this situation, but even better than that is that the composition has been arranged so that you get all the elements coming together. So I thought this was a really effective image. I've got to make some minor criticism, and it is really, really minor. I thought this part over here is slightly bright, and I'd be tempted not to tone it down in any way, but maybe just take off with a crop that bit at the side there. It is really a very minor thing, but I thought that might just help a little bit, because I found that bright spot just next to the tree there did tend to draw your eye away from both the ducks and the sheep. So just getting rid of that little bit, I think, just helps. But really, that is a very minor point. So those are my points on this particular image, and open it up now for any comments that anyone would like to make.
Thanks for that.
Okay. Are there any other comments, observations to make about this image from the rest of the people gathered?
Just it took 12 months to set up.
You did make an arrangement with the farmer.
I spent the full day with him and sorted things out. Yeah.
Yeah, how on earth do you get the sheep to behave like that? I've never seen them behave like that.
I took quite a lot that day, yes. And it shows as the title on the Herdwick Sheep Association banner.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it's well seen throughout England and, well, right on the world. Yeah, that.
There we go.
With it, just the bottom bit is cut off, and that bit that Keith said about is also cut off.
Oh, right.
That highlight. But it's the first time I've seen that actually, Keith. Look at me edges.
To us all, David. We can look at our pictures forever and we still don't see these tiny little things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was pleased to find out that it's David's picture. Are we going to be told, would it be good now to know whose picture it is after Keith's done his critique each time?
I thought we'd agreed to make it anonymous unless the author approved.
We can own up to the pictures if we want to.
Okay, we'll do it that way. Yeah. Yeah. Well owned up, David.
Yeah.
Okay, so shall we move on to the next one? Hello. And the next one is called Spring, for a very obvious reason, and because we've got this bee here collecting nectar from the flower in the center of the image. So very inviting evocation of spring. Importantly, I suppose the bee is at the heart of the flower and is very, very sharp indeed. You'll see other elements around are softer, which is very appropriate. It's really the bee that we want to concentrate on, and the stamens of the flower, obviously. In particular, the background is both subdued in terms of the color and tone, but also it's blurred as well by the depth of field. So all our attention can be on the bee, and it works very well indeed. I like the angle of the bee on the diagonal there. I think that gives a bit of compositional strength to it. Maybe could do with seeing a little more detail in the bee there. I appreciate that if you lighten the picture as a whole some of these other areas are going to be burnt out. So it would have to be selective lightning just in the thorax really of the bee, just to get a bit more of the detail that's there. Apart from that, the other observation that I had was one of cropping. There is this bright area over here on the left-hand side of this flower petal here, which sort of pulls the eye over because of its brightness. I thought it would work really well, this whole image, as a square format. So at the risk of offending the author, I'm going to do exactly that. And then you can see whether you agree with me or not. So I think using a square format focuses much more attention on the bee itself and improves the overall composition. Whether or not you agree is a different matter, but I thought that square crop works quite well.
Any comments?
I'm just going to get rid of that. Reset. There we go. Okay, back to the original. Yeah, so those are my comments on this one. I'm guessing by the silence that the author probably isn't here, or else they're so offended by what I'm suggesting that they've declined to comment. So if there aren't any comments, we'll move on to the next image. And this one is called The Polar Explorer, for fairly obvious reasons. And there's the figure on the right-hand side there. Got an appropriately intrepid look on his face, scanning the landscape. I see no polar bears or whatever. And it's the figure which obviously is the dominant feature in the image, and the lighting has given plenty of detail in the face, the eyes absolutely pin sharp, and his garments as well, which are moderately appropriate for the scene in which he's being presented, because this is obviously a composite image of the figure against the Arctic background there. So I thought the detail in the figure was absolutely superb, very well done. I'm a bit less convinced about the background, I have to say. You can see that it's suitably blurred, so it doesn't intrude upon the image as a whole. And you can see that there's hints of Arctic icebergs here and the icy tundra. So the subject of the background is fine. I just find it it's rather dull and subdued in colour and tone compared to the figure. So the figure leaps out, not necessarily a bad thing, but I think he leaps out a bit too much because the lighting on the figure doesn't quite seem to fit with the background. So I think the background then could be a little bit brighter perhaps, so that the tone of the background was more consonant with the tone on the figure in terms of lighting. I think that might help. The background is blurred throughout, so that even the foreground here, which is nearest to the figure, is as blurred as the middle ground and the background. So the overall impression that gives is rather of a theatrical backdrop, rather than it being a real scene that this figure is standing in, if that makes any sense. Not much you can do about that. You're using what you've got in terms of the background, but I think just a touch of lighter on the background might, as I say, make it more consonant with the figure. But the detail in the figure is absolutely superb, and that is, after all, what the image is about. But it's been put together as a composite, so you've got to make the other elements in the composite image, I think, fit with the figure. So those are my comments on that, and obviously invite anyone to comment on that.
Alan.
Mine. That helps. And I agree with Keith's comments. I struggled to find a background that complemented it, really. I worked on the theory that he was standing on an elevated position.
Right.
Therefore, the background was all kind of obviously quite out of focus. But I take your point about how subdued it was. Obviously, it started out quite bright and it competed with the figure. It's a fine balance, isn't it, to know how much you take it down to make the figure stand out, which is what I was trying to achieve. But then do you go over the top and make the background look a little artificial, which is a fair comment. So yeah, I take on board what you say. I've tried to improve it, although it's not really something I do very much of. I'm not in the same league as Julie and Sue Rugg, so it was also a bit of a play around while we've got time on our hands, should I say.
I wondered, Alan, whether you might ask your in-house expert whether you can fade the focus from foreground to background. That might give it a bit more reality, if you see what I mean, rather than, as Keith says, just being a bit of a backdrop.
Yes, if it wasn't blurred to start with, I think you could use some sort of filter in a layer where you could blur it gradually. I haven't tried that one myself though, so I'm not absolutely certain, but that's how I would try to do it.
Get that part a bit sharper, and then obviously recede into the background. That would help, I think.
I'll certainly have a look at it, Keith.
Yeah.
Thank you.
David?
Okay. My observation of this image is that perhaps the man looks too comfortable to be in an Arctic environment. And he looks rather cozy and warm with his perfectly trimmed beard. I mean, we know the character because we've seen him in other photographs, and I think he's a superb character with that absolutely amazing beard, and the pose here is equally impressive. I'm not sure that the choice of an Arctic background suits it particularly well, because I'm not going to be easily convinced that he's there, no matter how well the background is put in, because he just looks warm and comfortable. So that's the difficulty I have with it, as much as the appearance of the background. I think the composition is right, that he's looking out to the left of our image, but I just wonder whether he looks rather too comfortable to be Arctic. We need some frozen snot or something,
Yeah, throw a bucket of snow over him.
Anyway, that was just my thought about it, that's all.
Okay, if there's no more comments, we'll go on to the next image, which is Isla. Relatively well-known model, but here presented in ballerina format. This is a very, very pleasing portrait study of the ballerina. Particularly appreciate the fact that she's got this black costume on, which contrasts really well with the white walls around her and makes her stand out, obviously. Yeah, it was obviously an inspired choice to do that. She could have worn the standard ballet costume, which is invariably white, but having it black really makes her stand out, and also gives some edginess into the image. Definitely, she's Odile rather than Odette in this representation. I thought the composition worked really well. It's not just a portrait; she's actually involved in doing something, and what she's involved in doing is tying the ribbons around the ballet shoes. And the composition is arranged such that her eyes are pointing down in that direction. They follow the line of the leg as well. So you've got this, I don't know if you call it a leading line or not when it comes from that position in the middle of the image. But anyway, it is a sight line which takes you down to where she's tying her ribbons on the ballet pumps, I think they're called. And this point at where her fingers meet here is precisely on the third of the image in both that direction and also in the vertical direction as well. So in terms of the golden mean, this is where the action is, and this is where your eye would automatically go to compositionally on the basis of it being on thirds, or not exactly thirds, but the golden mean. So I thought, yeah, it's been put together extremely well in terms of composition. I think the square format suits it as well. All the interest is in the center where the ballerina is. There's nothing else of interest. All the rest is supporting that figure in the center. And so a square format works very well indeed. The angle at which the whole view's been taken has got this leading line coming from the corner here, and another one over here, natural leading lines formed by the junction of the wall and the floor. And so if your eye were to follow along those, then they take you to where the action is. So the composition, I think, is absolutely spot on, and the subject and the detail that can be seen in terms of exposure in the face and the torso of the ballerina is spot on, and as is the focus. So I thought this was a very pleasing portrait indeed, and you've got this added narrative interest with the tying of the ribbons. So one very minor point, and I know it's being pickety, but over here we've got a bit of cloning that's been going on, and I think you can see repetitive elements there. So you just need to take out one of the repeats to hide the fact that that's been cloned. And there's another one over here as well, where that area and that area are repeats as well. And just a little bit of attention to that. I'm sure some really fussy, nasty judge would pick on that and complain about it. I'm not complaining about it, but I'm just pointing it out as a very minor thing, but just for tidying it up. But yep, superb image, loved it.
Julie.
Thank you for those complimentary remarks. There's nothing much I can add. I agree with you with your comments about the cloning. She was taken in natural light, which I particularly like, as opposed to studio lighting.
Yeah.
Not much else I can say about it, really. She is a very photogenic lady.
Is she a ballet dancer? Because I've seen her in a number of ballet-oriented images.
No, she's not. She's a professional model.
Professional model, yeah.
She does quite a lot of modelling in a ballet costume.
Right.
I've actually had to do quite a lot of work on her ballet pumps because they were incredibly tatty. So I've had to tidy them up quite a bit.
Clean them up. Oh, very nice.
Cleaned them up and tidied them up. I also did quite a lot of work in Lightroom. I used one of the smoothing skin facilities to take out any blemishes on her skin.
Right.
But yeah, I was quite pleased with that. It's a room in Ireland in the mill where we use the studio, but there's also this room which is nearly all white, and it has a big picture window, so it's a bit cramped for taking photographs, but at the same time it does produce some nice effects. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, lovely. Anyone else, any comments to make? If not, we'll move on to the next image, which is Sunset on the River, Maheshwar, which well, I won't try and guess where it is. One assumes it's India, but it might not be. Anyway, this is obviously a moody image. Really conveys the peace and tranquility of this sunset scene very well. You've got a rather large expanse of sky, but that's absolutely necessary, obviously, because the boatman there is carrying a pole, and you've got to have the whole of the pole, I think, in the image to make sense of it. And so you're left with the sky. It's nice that there's this little spot of cloud over in the corner there. Nice because it gives some information into the otherwise blank sky, but also I think it helps balance the image as well. This dark area down here, quite a large expanse of the boat area there, and to some extent it's balanced by having that cloud detail over in the top left-hand corner. I don't object to the fact that the boatman is in silhouette. It would be silly to have detail in there because then it would look false against the setting sun. And it all fits in with the mood of the image to have him totally silhouetted. And the boat to some extent silhouetted as well. Rather unfortunately, there is this big plastic chair in the bottom. It's very subdued and dark, so doesn't intrude too much. It would be better if it wasn't there, but what can you do? You're in the boat and it is there. And if you want to get the whole of the rest of the image in, then you've got to put up with the fact that that's going to be there. Because I particularly like this pool of water here, which shows that the boatman is actually moving the boat along. And of course, you've got to get the pole in as well. So, yep, you put up with the fact that that you've got this plastic chair. As I say, it's dark, so it doesn't intrude too much. The orientation of the boat, or the position from which the photograph's been taken, the boat is on a slight diagonal, and you follow the line of the boat along, and it takes you up past the sun and the figure, and then up to the cloud. So I thought that was a rather nice diagonal compositional effect there, which helps guide the eye through the image as a whole. Other than that, yep, I don't think I have any other comments to make on this particular image. I found it very pleasing, and as I say, it's a picture of mood, and it conveys the sunset mood and the tranquility of the scene very well indeed. I think it helps that there are no other passengers sitting around chatting or whatever, so that you do concentrate entirely on the figure. And as I say, it lends itself to this this tranquil and peaceful mood which the image conveys. So well done. Any comments?
Graham.
Yes, that's my image. I agree entirely with what Keith has said. It has already been cropped to remove part of the boat. I felt I couldn't really crop it anymore because the image would have been all sky, no boat.
Yeah, I agree. So
unfortunately, I take on board your comments about the rather large chair in the immediate foreground, but I felt I'd cropped it as much as I was able.
Okay, no more comments. Then we'll pass on to the next image, you said, which is Derwent water. Comes as no surprise to anyone, since we all recognise that here we are looking out over Derwent water, down towards the jaws of Borrowdale, with Castle Crag sitting in the middle there. You'd say a rather traditional view of Derwent water, but I think what this picture has, or this image has, that adds to this particular scene, is the fact that the author's chosen to frame the view down to Borrowdale with these elements in the foreground. Those elements being the 2 trees up here, top left, top right, and then the bushes at the bottom, bottom left, bottom right. So you get a sort of window then to take your eye down the scene into Borrowdale. So I thought that worked exceptionally well. I thought that was very well seen, a great compositional idea. The angle of the view is also helped by the lines of the fells in the background. So the ones on the right here form a line taking you down to Castle Crag, and the ones on the left give you a leading line going down as well. So really the composition hangs together exceptionally well and was very well chosen, as is the exposure. So throughout you've got lots of detail in all elements of the scene. And this framing aspect here, I thought could be improved by just a little crop. And I'm sorry if I irritate people with my cropping, but it's really more of a suggestion than an instruction. But I thought it worked better if
we like Dominic Cummings.
Oh, well, we won't go any further than that. Anyway, yes, so I thought just cropping out around the back helped the framing a little more. Whether you agree or not, it's a personal preference, but I thought that did help with making the point that that the author was already made in putting together the composition. So let's get out of that. Go back to the scene.
That's my image. I'm not convinced on your cropping.
Okay.
I think your cropping was a bit harsh. But again, it's a personal choice. Apart from that, thank you.
Okay, no, well, yeah. So those were the compositional elements. In terms of exposure, I've already mentioned that it's good exposure all the way through. It's crying out for a neutral density. The light is a bit flat, the nature of the day and the nature of the weather, but it needs a bit of either a neutral density filter on the scene, graduated filter, to just darken the sky down a little bit and put a bit more detail into the sky. As I say, because it is a dull, cloudy day, so it would help, I think, by darkening that sky down a little. You could do it post-processing as well in Lightroom or Nik Effects if you use Nik Effects. Rather than if you haven't got a filter to go on the front of the camera. And it would be help, I think, if this area was lightened up a little bit around Castle Crag. I mean, as I pointed out, you've got these leading lines and the fact that you've got a window onto Borrowdale that takes your eye naturally in that direction. But I think it would give added interest if you also just lightened up the central area there around Castle Crag. In Nik Effects, you can do that with darken, light, and center. But I'm sure you can also do it in Lightroom as well. So those were, yeah, my observations.
Keith, I think I would agree with you. I prefer the crop. Sorry about that, Stephen. But I think the crop adds to it.
Okay, thank you. I'll play.
Okay, we'll carry on then and take the next image, which is stepping out. I doubt whether this was set up. This is, I think, opportunistic and superbly well seen, that we've got these amazing graffiti on the wall, and all, well, I say all, what the photographer had to do was wait for a suitable figure to come into the scene, and then the image would be complete. And fortunately, you've got this perfect figure coming in, this young lady who stepped into the scene. She's wearing just the right appropriate clothes so she doesn't great and stand out at you, because she's not the total subject of the image, but she obviously contributes quite a lot to it. Obviously you have to wait until she gets to this position here, because otherwise she would obscure either the graffiti over here or these posters here, which it's nice to be able to see in their completion. And she stands out better when she's away from those elements. So it was the perfect time to press the shutter. Even more perfect because of her stance, really. The fact that she's obviously striding forwards purposely, and the angle of the leg and the arm there helped to take your eye along the direction of flow in which she's walking. So that, I think, works really, really well. Now, the other feature I'd need to comment on, well, a couple of features. One is the exposure, and that's perfect throughout, so that you can see all the detail of the graffiti, and you can read all the posters if that's what you want to do. So the exposure is absolutely perfect. Obviously, the shutter speed's perfect as well to freeze the action of the young lady. And as I pointed out, the angle of the arm and the leg there really helps this image. Gives a dynamic feel to movement through the image, just from the way she's positioned. But the other thing I wanted to say, which is obvious, is that this is a monochrome. It's been converted from color, and I think that was a very wise decision. Graffiti, by their very nature, are going to be bright and colorful. And I think if you saw all the colors around here, along with her in her dark clothes, it would jar, and you would lose the impact of the figure. And so by having it in black and white, I think that prevents you from just concentrating on the graffiti and ignoring the fact that there's a figure walking through as well. So I thought, yeah, I thought it was really well seen and really well captured too. Now, as is my want, I'm going to talk about cropping again, because there's this slightly bright area over here, which is only partially visible in terms of making out what it is. There's this bright plaque here, and then you've got this board up here with words on it. And whenever there's any element in the scene which has words on, the temptation is for the viewer to start trying to read it. And you wouldn't want them to start looking up at the top left-hand corner, nor really over here. And you really want to be concentrating on the other parts of the image. So I would, as a suggestion, just take out that bit on the side. I think it, maybe not a bad thing, it pulls your eye over, but I think it distracts maybe a little bit as well by having that in. And the whole image is complete without it. So I'd be tempted to just take that little bit out. But that's really quite a minor criticism, or not hardly a criticism, minor observation in terms of the image as a whole, which I thought worked really well, and as I say, was really well seen. So that completes my comments on that.
Yeah, that one was mine. You're right about the cropping. I should have cropped that in. I would have done had I thought about it, but I obviously didn't. I think it does work much better in black and white.
Yeah.
What you can do when you convert it is get the colours, depending what filter you put onto it. I use silver effects. You can change the black and white appearance dramatically by choosing a particular colour filter. So the blues become darker or lighter, and the reds lighter or darker. And it's quite good fun playing with that to see what effects you get from it. The one thing that disappointed me a bit is she's a little bit out of focus, which would have been better if she had been sharper, I think.
Yeah, I didn't object to that particularly. I mean, I talked about the movement, which was conveyed by the positioning and her stance, and obviously a little bit of blur also gives you an idea of movement as well. So she's not being posed in the scene, she's actually moving through it. So yeah, I didn't think that was a particular problem.
Involved with me. Can you unmute yourself, Ken? Oh, there you are. I think you should be. Are you there, Ken? Yeah.
No, but it was the last image, because I've got a better solution to the crop. If the left-hand side, there's a definite leaning verticals on it, and the right-hand side doesn't have. It's very easy to fix. If you fix the leaning verticals, half of that, half of
Yes.
that stuff there would go.
Yeah.
That's because I'd already done that and not quite got it right.
Right, it's dead simple. I'll send you something, Richard, that shows you how to do it really easily. You can actually stretch the top round, and it would just cure that perfectly, and leave the right hand side untouched. Dead simple, dead easy.
Tony,
Good point.
I just think that I'd clone out the security camera. I'd find myself looking at it.
all right, yeah.
All right, that one. Yeah.
All right, yeah, hadn't spotted that. Okay, yeah. Or turn it round and point it at her.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we'll move on then. So, I say this one was Vatican at sunset. Fairly obvious what it is. Yeah, very another evocative, moody scene of nighttime. But what's exceptional in this is all the detail that can be seen in the lit areas of the buildings in the distance here, particularly the Vatican, of course, which is the central point of the image, and the reflections in the water as well. So extremely well seen. The positioning is such that you've got leading lines going from the bottom right-hand corner, the path that runs alongside by the side of the river, as well as the string of lights. And you kept these trees in here as well, which form another leading line taking you down to the Vatican. There's some rim lighting on the trees. That's not an artifice, I don't think, of taking the nighttime scene. I think it's backlighting. You can see the light coming through the trees in points, so it's the lighting coming from behind the trees. So I can live with that rim lighting that's shown there. Don't think it's a distraction in any way. So I thought it was a very well composed scene, and obviously very well taken in terms of exposure to get all the detail in the bridge and the building in particular there. All work together really well. There is a lot of sky. I thought maybe there was slightly too much sky. I thought cropping off probably about there will still give you all the detail of the sunset and the contrast between the pink and the blueness above it, but would move your eye down a bit to not explore all the space above, but to concentrate more on the Vatican. Might even move that in a little as well. Anyway, that's me messing about with cropping again, so we'll take that off. So the only other issue I had was the bright blue lights, turquoise lights of the reflection there. They are there, yeah, but I think I would be tempted to take them out just because the colour of that is so out of kilter with the pinks and the subdued tones around of the other colours in the image. So I do think that blue reflection there distracts. It certainly pulls your eye down into the water and away from the subject, which is the Vatican. So I'm sure you probably thought about it, but I would be inclined to have cloned that out. Otherwise, yes, I think a very, very pleasing image, as I say, in all respects, both giving you the mood of the sunset and the detail in the buildings, as well as the compositional attractions, which I've already highlighted. So yeah, well done for that.
Keith, rather than, or the author really, rather than clone it out, which might make it look a little bit difficult in that area of water, my inclination would be just to desaturate it.
Just tone it, yeah.
I think with the desaturation tool, you could just take that down to a point where it wouldn't really show very much. It would just be a light spot along with all the others, rather than try to clone it out and then it looked quite odd.
Yeah, yeah. Good point. Any other comments?
David, Leighton.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say it's my my thing. Yeah, the green traffic light, I was umming and ahhing what to do with it, and the shadow, and everything I tried made it look worse rather than better, but possibly just trying to desaturate on the particular colour might work. And I agree with the crop. I'm getting more into cropping, and this, yeah, there is a bit too much sky, and maybe a 9:16 crop would look better. Yeah, but thank you.
Okay, thanks, David. Move on to the next image. Holy man. Very kind holy man. Is that what I'm supposed to say, Marilyn? Anyway, this is another, I think, well, it's not posed, I think it's opportunistic. I imagine that this is on the banks of the Ganges in Varanasi or wherever, and you were, the author is in a boat sailing past this guy, and then superbly, just at the right moment, he raises his hand either to tell you to stay away, or more likely it's a greeting or a blessing. Let's be generous, and that really makes the picture. The fact that he's doing something, he's engaging anyway with the photographer with his eyes, but just raising his hand there at the same moment as he was just lifting over here on his right, on the left of the image, lifting this golden bowl here, and you've got a wonderful diagonal line going between the raised hand, well, the two raised hands, the right hand raised with the bowl and the left hand raised in greeting, and taking you by his face, so that you've got a lovely compositionally a diagonal line there taking you through the image. Well exposed, so you've got lots difficult because you've got his dark face here against lighter background and his light clothes, but there's lots of detail in the face, so the composition's been the exposure's been handled really well to bring out that detail, and what a wonderful face he's got anyway. So you need that really to add to the. Wasn't going to mention the bright spot on the left-hand shoulder. It doesn't bother me particularly. Another judge might say, "Oh, that should be toned down," and I expect you could do that. I expect you could select that part and tone it down a little. It doesn't really bother me, but I'm just making a comment that it's there. You also got the bright spot on there as well, which absolutely doesn't bother me. But someone else might say, "Oh, you should clone into that area and fill in the bright spot." But yeah, whatever. The background is quite sharp. It doesn't distract. Two reasons for that. One is that the colours in the background are rather similar to the colours of the garment that the holy man's wearing. So there's no jarring there. It doesn't really distract because it's so similar. And also it's rather featureless as well. So the background being sharp in this context, I don't think matters at all. The guy stands out so well anyway. Having said all that and going on about cropping as I tend to do, I'd still take a little bit off the top and a little bit off the bottom, just to reduce the amount of that background which is on show. And it keeps the same proportion where the eyes of the figure are about 1/3 of the way down in the image, which is an appropriate point for them to be. And so it works just as well as the original image. It just takes away a bit of the background, which, well, makes the image slightly stronger, I feel. But otherwise, very well seen image, very well captured at exactly the right moment, decisive moment, and well exposed, so you get lots of detail of this fantastic figure. So extremely well seen, extremely well done.
The only thing I would add to it, I think if it's Marilyn's image, I'm not certain. I assume it was Marilyn's or David's, but is I would do a little bit more work on the eyes, because I think it's such a beautiful picture. The story is in his face, and because of the light, it's quite bright. I think you could probably bring those eyes up selectively in Lightroom using the brush.
Mm-hmm.
Bring out the detail a little bit more.
Yeah.
Make just so much more of that, because it's just a fabulous travel picture.
Yes, I agree with you, Alan. I did struggle. I don't use Lightroom, but I did struggle to bring out the eyes. It was an issue. I do agree with Keith. I'd got the light spot on the shoulder and on the whatever it is, the bowl there. I should have actually just cloned that and got rid of that. But I do agree that I could have probably done something else with the eyes. It was hard to do. I did try. I need probably a little bit of guidance there. But thanks very much for that critique. I'm very happy, Keith. Thanks, Alan.
Thank you.
Okay, so move on to the next one, which is River Derwent. This is a, well, sort of pseudo ICM image in which it's the water that's doing the intentional movement rather than the camera. But it's the slow shutter speed that's been used here has produced a wonderful effect. Really, these, where's my cursor? These smooth lines here are absolutely beautiful. And you can feel the movement from them in your eyes. Because of the shape of these lines here, your eyes move from the left part of the scene through the image to the right, following the lines of the streaks of the smoothed out water. So you've got these turbulent areas as well in the image, and they do add, because they add a bit of interest, extra interest into the image as a whole. So I thought they worked quite well. I like particularly the fact that you've got this concave shape here, complemented by a convex shape up here. It's all part of the rhythm of the image, and I think it's that rhythm which is throughout the whole image, which makes it such a strong image. I'd be interested to know what happens to the left of this particular turbulent area. It rather comes out of nowhere, as it were, that turbulent area appears there. I mean, the other turbulent area is a whole piece, so it begins and ends, whereas this, you're just getting the end of it. So I didn't know whether there was more just over here, which might have completed as part of the image. But yeah, I'm just speculating, aren't I? I don't think it's a major defect that you haven't got the rest of that wave. I think you've got all the interest in there anyway. As I say, it is very effective as an ICM image and as an image altogether. And it's the movement really, and as the word before was rhythm, and I think that's what this image has got. So I found it a very pleasing image, and well seen and well captured in terms of exposure, but most particularly in terms of shutter speed to capture that smoothing of the water and generate a sense of movement through the image. So yeah, very, very, very well done image.
Yeah, that's my image. I think maybe the bit what's missing, maybe a bit off of the crop, but I've just cropped in a little bit on. But I can't remember whether there is much more going on beyond that point.
Right.
Okay, sorry about that.
I think another, oh sorry, can I speak?
David?
Yeah. Another aspect of the image which I I find quite intriguing is that it appears to have a slow shutter speed to enable the movement of the water. But in the, almost in the center of the image, you've got like droplets of water indicating that the shutter speed is quite fast. So you've got both the smoothness of the slow shutter speed, but you've got some almost sharper elements of it so that it's not all a blurred image.
I think it was about the 13th of a second, that's all.
I'd say.
All right, yeah.
I thought it would be around a 15th of a second where you can get those two elements coming together. So when I said slow shutter speed, yeah, slowish shutter speed.
Yeah, I thought the same thing as David though. There's, you know, how did you capture those drops when the rest of it's there's so much movement in it? The drops, a couple of drops in the middle are pin sharp, aren't they?
Just timing, I think. Lucky.
I think when you're doing something like that, and I assume that's what you've achieved here very, very well, is that as you've panned with your camera, you've started on the right and moved from right to left, and you've been a little bit faster, hence the blurry bit. And then when you've actually fired the shutter off, you've actually captured that water, which is just off center. Because if you look to the left, it's actually not quite as blurry in that element. So I think that's how you've achieved it, but it's very effective, and I love it a lot.
It was taken on a tripod.
Right. I still assume that you were moving a little bit faster from. You were panning on a tripod, I assume, were you?
No, I've not moved.
Oh, you haven't moved?
No.
So it's not ICM at all?
It's literally flowing over a border on the, just out of shot on the right-hand side. And that's producing the effect as it goes over the boulder and dips down.
And corrected. Well, it's very effective then. You've obviously achieved it, because it does give the impression of being camera movement, certainly when you look at it.
Yes.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Move on to the next image, which is another bee on flowers. This is a bee fly on forget-me-nots. And perfectly exposed image of the bee collecting nectar from the florets, the group of or the flower, forget-me-not flower with the individual florets, and the proboscis, if that's how you pronounce it, of the bee, perfectly lined up there, taking the pollen from the stamens. So absolutely superb timing to get that precise moment when it's all going on. I particularly like the wings of the bee, which are those blurred on either side, so that you've got the movement of the wings to position the bee in the precise point that he needs to be in order to collect the nectar. So in terms of natural history, this is a fantastic image for depicting this behavior of the bee. It helps that the bee is pin sharp, absolutely pin sharp, to get all that detail, behavioral detail, and that the florets of the forget-me-not in the background just slightly blurred, so that despite the fact that they are quite bright and colourful, they don't detract from where you should be looking, which is at the bee and what he's up to. So I thought that balance worked really well. Depth of field is such that those are thrown slightly out of focus, whereas the bee remains completely in focus. In composition terms, the authors elected to show you the whole of the plant, or more of the plant than just the area that the bee's concerned with. And we've got this floret down here, which is quite interesting and rather sharp. And pictorially, what that does is it's rather competes with the bee and what he's up to. I think I know why it's like it is, but just to be, I don't know, awkward, I'm going to suggest again a crop, which keeps those elements in. And I think that's a much stronger image, although I did look at the pixels and I'm aware that this is probably quite a severe crop on top of the image as a whole. And no doubt that's why you elected originally to have more of the plant in than perhaps you would have otherwise, simply because of the size of the image and the amount it's been cropped in order to get the detail in the bee. But I thought that was a more balanced crop and emphasised more the activity of the bee. So let's take that out and revert back to the normal. So yeah, I think those are all my comments really. I thought all this action that's going on there absolutely superbly captured, tells a nature story, natural history story, and is very pleasing pictorially. The colours of the flower, the activity of the bee, and its detail, and the background, as it would be really on the depth of field you've got, completely thrown out of focus and therefore not intruding in any way on the image. So apart from my observation about focusing on this area here rather than this in the bottom right hand corner, I thought it was a very well seen, very well taken image.
Tony?
Apart from it's a fly, not a bee.
Whatever.
Yeah. A very special fly.
The clue was in the name. Think of the forget-me-nots as just an extra line of ducks in the picture. Balancing line of ducks. Thanks, Keith.
I think the temptation to keep the bottom flower in is that it's on the same plane as the fly and the leaf that leads up to it.
Yeah.
And because of that, they're all pin sharp all the way through. And there is a line that leads up through to the bee, all in pin sharpness. And so there's an element that sort of encourages that to be left in. Although I do understand what you're saying, Keith, about taking it out. I would take it out simply because it's better than any that I've managed to take of the bee fly.
Well, you'd take out the bee and leave the flower at the bottom, would you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so the next image is the Ussant Mountain Dawn, up in Sutherland, is it? Up in the far northwest of Scotland. These frequently photographed and beautiful mountains up there. This is a different image from ones I've seen of those that mountain range, not only because it's black and white, but also because it's got this fantastic layers of mist running all the way through it. It's a panorama, obviously, whether it's an expensive panorama camera or whether it's been stitched across, well, multiple images, whatever, doesn't matter. I'm just looking at the image as a finished product, and it's really effective as a panorama. Encourages horizontal movement of the eye across the image, but that's what you really need because, as I say, it's these layers of mist caught by the light from the sky, which is what this image is really all about. You've got the mountains just in silhouette, and that's absolutely fine. You don't need them to see the detail in there at all. It's the shapes which are important. You've got the foreground, which is exposed such that you can see some detail in the foreground. And I think that's quite effective. I think that helps in giving you a three-dimensional perspective in the image that your eye starts off with the in focus, as it were, detail here that you can see, and then moves more and more through the image until you get to the silhouetted no detail background, and it just gives a three-dimensional feel to the whole image. The sky is absolutely fantastic and well controlled, nothing burnt out in terms of exposure, and the overall scene is well exposed. Was one, it's not an issue, there's one feature which also captured my eye, and that is there's a hint of God rays in this image. You can see them coming down here and here and radiating out all the way through. And I did wonder, and I've made a note here, not that I could do it, but I did wonder whether they could be brought out more to make them more prominent, because if we had that added feature of the God rays as well on top of those lines of mist, then that's an absolutely amazing image. No doubt you can't have one, it's either or. You either get the God rays coming through by darkening down the whole image, in which case you lose lots of detail around the rest of it, or else you do as you've chosen to do, and that is keep the mist being the highlight, which it is, and which makes the photo. But yeah, superb landscape, and being in monochrome black and white absolutely lends itself to presenting this image. You're just concentrating on the bright areas and not bothered about color, which might be a distraction otherwise. So I think it works extremely well, and the panoramic format is spot on. That's exactly what this scene needs, and that's what it's about. So yeah, thank you for that.
It'll come as no surprise to anybody, this is mine. And it isn't mist, it is rain.
Yeah?
It was smashing it down. There was showers flying in, and that's probably 3 or 4 storm or showers going through the image. It was blowing about 60 miles an hour, luckily at my back. And these showers were just flying through. The weather forecast didn't say that was going to happen, which was a bit of a pity. But I don't mind it. It did make the image, because without the rain, it's actually quite flat. Yeah, I'll have a think about making more of the God rays. I kind of left them like that. Don't know. And it's a true panorama. It was 27 images, 9 bracketed, because the dynamic range was just scary, because the sun started trying to go through. But
it's a beautiful image, Ken. I really love it.
Agreed.
Yeah, I love it.
I'm not. I love the light. I'm not overly keen on it personally. I like the shape of the light and the kind of mid-ground I really like. But you know, I did play with trying to bring detail into those 2 mountains. It's Sylvan on the right, and I can't remember what the one on the left's called. But it doesn't work. As soon as I tried to put any detail in it, it just...
No, I think there's enough detail.
I wondered about cropping off the detail from the bottom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What do you mean, actually just...
So you've just got the wonderful, well, not mist, the wonderful rain and light thing, without having the detail in the foreground.
Well, you know, I mean, it's a huge file. As I said, it's 27 Nikon D810, 36 megapixel files. It's, you know, it's you know, 20,000 pixels wide by whatever. So I could actually take any part of that and make an A3 print from it. Even like those tiny little fir trees, the bottom left there, you know, third of the way up in the left, I could actually make that an A3 print. Not that I would, but I mean, I could. but personally, I wouldn't enter that into a competition.
Really?
I was disappointed. One, because I got up at about 6 o'clock in the morning.
Just because you
standing on top of a mountain with a hurricane at my back and the rain smashing into me, and I wanted colour, and there was no colour in the sunrise at all, absolutely none. And what was even worse, by the time I get back to my B&B, breakfast was over.
I think it's an absolutely stunning image.
So do I. I think it's a beauty, that.
Obviously, I don't. I mean, do I like it? Yes. And I mean, that's only the middle part of the image. The image is about 3 times wider than that, really. But yeah, it's okay.
Right.
It'll make a nice triptych then.
Well, yes, I have got it as one. I'll send it to you if you want. I might need to reduce the file size somewhat because it's about 4 gigabytes.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Lovely.
Yeah. Well,
one last thing. After when I started, developing it, and I looked down at this, 4 or 5 deer standing looking at me about 200 yards, just looking up at me, and I thought, I don't notice you. I didn't notice you when I was standing there, because I did stand on top of the hillside for about 2 hours, from long before dawn, long after the sun had got up in it. And I thought, how can this 6 foot high beast? How come I never even noticed it? I suppose they're good at hiding, and I'm not.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Okay. Moving on then, here's another landscape, seascape. The mountains seem to have developed a liquid form. This is called blue silk. So the illusion is that this is fabric rather than anything else. But of course it is waves on the sea. It's, I'm guessing, been given a monochrome that's then been toned by the blue. Although it might be natural for all I know, but it does give a very pleasing effect, suggesting moonlight on the river, on the water, on the waves, sea or river. Hard to say. I think sea, but never mind. Whatever. It's got quite a narrow depth of field, so the focus bits that are in focus are in the middle ground there. And then obviously the focus fades away towards the back. And I think that works to give a recession in the image, just like it would if they were real mountains, and guides the eye through. The composition, I thought, works really well. I found that my eye just traveled through these peaks down the center of the image. And I found lots of detail in there to explore. I like, again, using the same word, the rhythm of those receding waves going through. The only slight jarring point, I thought, in terms of composition and what I've just said, the journey of my eye anyway, going through the center, was this rather sharp area over here on the left-hand side. I found it slightly distracting and pulled my eye over towards that area. And I thought you could get rid of it. Not is another question, but I thought it could be got rid of by a crop that that gave you that. And I thought that crop also brought you a bit more into the scene as well, so you feel a bit more immersed and in following the pattern of the waves going through. But that was that's just me. Get rid of that. Oops. Okay, lots of detail. The exposure is perfect. There's no burnt out areas anywhere in the image. So exposure and the shutter speed obviously is appropriate for what's being shown here. Similar to the previous river image, it's probably around a 15th or whatever, so slowish shutter speed maybe. Yeah, I thought this was a really pleasing and an effective composition. So well done, whoever.
Thank you, Keith. That's one of mine, actually. So, yeah, thank you very much for your comments and what you've pointed out. Because I did struggle with, do I crop it further or do I just leave it where it is? And that sort of sharp bit on the left-hand side, I was drawn to that. But I think with what you're saying is a crop actually does improve it. But for some reason, that sharp side on the left, depending on how you look at it, my eye initially thought it's possibly like snow.
Right, yeah.
And although it isn't snow, but you could then make into it what potentially you wanted to. So, but yeah, no, I take on board your comments actually to do a bit more of a crop on that. So thank you.
Okay.
I've got a different crop for you.
Go on then.
Which is just your very, very sharp bit down to the middle.
Okay.
So you've got the sharp bit at the back and what's another hill at the front, which is softer, and it's a juxtaposition of the sharp against the soft. And so you're roughly there. I'll maybe crop a bit more off the right hand side. It might look like rubbish when you do it, but I would bring that in a wee bit further. Yeah, maybe there, and see what that looks like. Maybe a bit off the bottom. Of course, I do remember an American woman with one of mine going, well, if you crop that bit off and you crop that bit off, you're left with this tiny little boat in the middle. I see, I quite like that bit, but it's just different because I like that sharp bit. But it does spoil the rhythm of the softness of everything else.
It does. Maybe I'll have to go back to the rest of the sets that I've got and have a look at those and work on those. Since I think I've got about 80 or 50 of them.
You could also use a little bit of Gaussian blur just on the hard bits to just reduce the hardness just a touch.
Okay.
That would be an alternative, yeah, to just tone it down slightly. Because I do recognise that you...
Yeah, it's just that bit.
Which is mirrored by the completeness over there. So, yeah, it's just the roughness, really, on there. Or else, like Ken says, you make a virtue of that, and that's the point of it. But,
okay.
Anyway,
thank you all.
And really liked it.
If you use Lightroom, is it texture you call it, the new one that's come in? It's under clarity. If you use a negative texture brush, you might just be able to remove enough of that hardness.
Okay.
I think it's the one that's under clarity. I think it's, or above clarity. Okay. Texture, it's one of the new ones. About a year ago it came in. A bit of negative texture might just do it.
This texture, is it? Okay. Moving on then. The next to last is framing the artist. And this is a case of being in the right place at the right time and getting set up and getting the decisive moment, I'm guessing, rather than you setting it up and saying, do you want to go and stand over there with an easel and paint and I'll take a photo of you. At least you'll correct me, of course, and say, oh no, that's exactly what I did. But anyway, it looks as though it was an opportunistic photo and that you spotted that you had this framing around the artist with the tree here in the foreground, and then she's placed within that frame, and it makes a pleasing photograph, which of course it does. Well exposed all the way through, so you've got the background blurry, but the detail can be made out, and then of course the lake itself and the lady standing there painting. I don't know whether it's Ullswater or where it is, but anyway, that's it. I think the framing concept, which is the clever idea in this image, would have been made more of, a little bit more detail not detail, a little more space there of the tree coming over, and again at the side to make it a little bit more obvious that it's framing the scene with the tree. Maybe you couldn't. Maybe if you step back, you get run over by a fleet of motorbikes or something. But I think it would have helped if it had been a bit more complete in terms of the framing. The only other issue I had was the lady herself. Presumably, she wasn't someone that you knew, so you couldn't shout out and say, "Excuse me, could you just turn a little to the right?" But if she had, that would have been quite nice, I think, to have just got a profile anyway of her face as well. You can't set up these things if you're just taking them as a candid shot. So that's immaterial, really, because it works quite well as it is, having the artist set there. And I say it was the clever idea, really, of spotting the tree framed and then introducing it as framing the artist. And so it was very well planned and very well taken.
Thanks, Keith. That was one of mine.
All right.
You are right. It was totally opportunistically taken. It's actually Derwent Water.
It's where?
Derwent Water.
Oh, right.
I was about 300 yards west of the Chinese bridge.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I thought this
background.
I thought this was a ferry in the background here.
That's Lodor.
Yeah, that's not a ferry. They were non-running.
That's the house. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's Skidder behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the cropping issue. I haven't got much more of the tree in the original than this anyway, because it was filling up too much space. And I did take some off the top because it just seemed to be too heavy. That was my view.
Okay. Yeah.
Mm. And if I'd have asked her to move, she wouldn't have been painting the same picture and the same angle.
Yeah. Well, and if you moved round a bit, then you'd lose the tree. So yeah,
I'd lose the frame. Yeah,
you can't win. But I thought it was quite effective as it was, and very well.
Thank you.
Okay. Last but by no means least, we've got the Tibetan wool baller. I don't know where he gets them from. Anyway, it is a fine travel picture of this Tibetan. I hesitate to say lady because I can't. Not totally sure, but I'm sure it is a lady, perhaps, who was busy winding wool ball, hence the inspired title. And what impresses me most is the wonderful detail, particularly in her face. She's got absolutely superb expression and lots of detail in the face there. And then you've got the scene of what she's actually up to. I think it's indoors. It looks as though it's indoors. So you must have had lighting issues, which have been overcome superbly to get all the detail and exposure correct all the way through the image. So extremely technically well done. Composition. I can appreciate that you want to show this lady in her context there and her environment, and you want it to tell a story. I think the story is the winding the wool. There's the skeins in the background waiting to be wound, and there's this great pile of woolen balls in the front, which she's working her way through making, and there she is making another one there. And that's where the whole story is. And you were tempted to include other elements as well. So you've got her shoes here to show the sort of life she's living. She's obviously infirm. You've got the trainer here as well. But I think in this particular case, less is more. I think despite the fact that those elements are all very interesting and add to the story, and here I go cropping again, but I think what I would be inclined to do is something more along those lines, so that you concentrate really the image on her amazing face and the task that she's up to. And although those other bits are interesting and add to the environmental context of where she is in the Tibetan abode, nevertheless, in terms of pictorial image, this is where the story is really. It's around this amazing lady and mountain of jewels, if you'll pardon the expression. I thought, as a travel image, it's well, superb, really effective, really tells the story, and extremely well factored technically to give us the view of this lady and what she's up to. So well done.
Yeah, well, thanks, Keith. That is mine. I cropped this image about 8 times, I think, and each time I took a little bit more off the sides and top and bottom, and until I thought, because I wanted to keep it all really. It's a, and I kept cropping bits off it, and I thought, no, I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose the walking stick, and I don't want to lose the shoes, because I thought it added to the story. But I quite understand that you're less attached emotionally to this image than I am.
Yeah.
And so as a consequence, you can make a more rational assessment of it. So I appreciate what you've done there. The original image, it is indoors, and the lighting was particularly difficult, as you quite rightly say. And there's a window to the top left of this image.
All right.
And that I tried to dull down dramatically. The lighting was particularly difficult, and I dropped my camera and broken the back of it, so I couldn't look at what I was taking. It was like having a film camera all over again, and I was taking images with different settings, hoping that one of them might be all right. You've done as I say, the suggestion of the crop, I think it probably does. I have to reluctantly agree with you, despite my continual crops. But thanks very much for that, Keith.
Okay. I just think she's so amazing. You just got to get her as the centre of attention, and for this particular image, anyway. Okay, so that's the last of the 16. A lovely bunch, but it sounds a bit derogatory, but a lovely selection of images which were presented for me to take a look at and pass my silly comments on. So thank you for everyone that submitted an image, and really enjoyed looking at them.
Well, equally, Keith, we'd like to thank you very much, because this is the first time anything like this has been attempted. I think you've done a sterling job of giving everyone a very positive critique. It hasn't been in any way destructive. It's been very constructive, and it enables us to use some of those images in future competitions. Because I mean, that's the whole joy of this. It's not a competition, and we can utilise the images now. Perhaps they will be better. They'll be better for what you've said. Somebody's removing a mic, I think, but it's anyway. Yeah, I think it's better for what you said, and it enables us to improve our images if we're going to put them in competitions. And so I thank you very much for that. I think personally that has worked well, and I hope we get some positive feedback to do this same sort of thing in the future.
I felt it worked well. Don't know what everyone else thinks, but
yeah, definitely worked well.